Hello. Today I want to talk about Kanban, or I guess some people might say Kanban or something like that, but I like to say Kanban. Sounds, I don't know, sounds cool to me that way. I don't know if I've ever heard what the proper way to pronounce it is. The material I'm going to talk about today comes from Agile Project Management with Kanban by Eric Breckner. As you can see, it is a thin book. I've assigned reading for the Quick Start Guide, Chapter 2. The whole book is in O'Reilly, and you have access to the whole book. It's really not a big book, as again, it's thin. It's extremely well written, and what I really like about it is it's written by a manager at Microsoft who has actively deployed these methods in the Xbox teams and elsewhere. By the way, there are videos that Eric Breckner has online, I believe you can watch, where he talks about this, and you can see his own presentations about the material. I think Kanban is, I've never actually used it in my own life, but from everything I can read here, it all makes a huge amount of sense. It's very appealing. I kind of think of the progression. We've got there's lots of software development methodologies, life cycles, whatever we want to call them. Ones we've been talking about. We've talked about Waterfall. Waterfall, I think this is really characterized for a lot of teams, especially delving into projects where there's lots of unknowns. So we've never built this before. The client wants something new and different. We haven't done it yet. That leads to, I really feel, not lost, but lots of waste, which then also brings delays or, just a real mess. So again, it's characterized by, we've planned out everything, all the details. It's just that we didn't realize that the client didn't realize they wanted something different, and the client asks for a change. So all that, and there could be a whole cascade of repercussions then because of a need for a change, and we end up scrapping a huge amount of that planning and specification effort and have to do it over again. Even worse, we might have planned out the whole project. We might be slowly working through the whole thing, and then we realize really late, when we can finally start showing things in more detail to the client and they see how it really works, that then they say, no, I want to change, and huge amounts of development effort as well is scrapped. And yeah, so all those initial time estimates, all that work gets thrown out. So the typical progress for these projects is we're working on it. There's lots of stuff we didn't realize, and we end up always, to meet a deadline, we always end up either working really hard, but usually it's working hard plus cutting out scope, removing things that we had originally thought we could fit into it, but we can't because we had changes, and those changes then required work that made we had to cut out material that we had wanted to produce. It's actually a fairly frustrating way to work. So again, it seems to work really well when you're able to come up with a specification and no one wants any changes. Because then you just build what you said you're going to build. You've actually figured out lots of stuff. So it can be good. but it often is not. It's not the norm for it to work out the way you want it to. So again, we had this movement and change in software. And I think from a historical standpoint, it's interesting. I'm old enough to have lived through this change as a professional software developer. So I started working in 1996 after earning a master's degree at a startup in Boston. And a lot of what we did, we were incorporating. This is entirely thanks to our progressive manager, Nancy Benovich Gilby. We were incorporating actually a lot of agile things. We had a daily stand-up. We kept track of tasks, you know. We didn't actually plan things out with huge documents and everything. This was the modern era. And I actually believe a lot of agile came about not so much by a bunch of white guys meeting in Utah at a ski resort, but because it was happening overall in the industry because of the shift to the internet. Once we had the internet, we no longer shipped software physically. We started to ship it digitally. People downloaded it. And we had websites. We had basically software as a service. Oh, there's a bug. You can go fix the website. Oh, we can change. The cycle changed radically. I mean, I saw a presentation that was produced by managers, some manager at Yahoo, and their big shift was, yeah, we work in feature teams. Okay, so we make a small team, and that team works cohesively to add a new feature to the website. Well, that's a very agile approach. A small team, we're all working together, we're concentrated, and we're going to get things done. So, we label it all agile with a big A now, and we like to look back at that agile manifesto. But people were doing agile things and hadn't read any agile manifesto. I still remember making it after working for several years and made it to Seattle. I was working for Microsoft, and I was in a bookstore, and there was this book, and it was some initial publication about Scrum. And I was just like, wow, this is so cool. This is so exciting. It details out with like real good instructions and stuff a lot of what we were trying to get to had started to do with our processes. So it wasn't so much, oh, this is a revelation. I've never heard of this before. It was, oh, absolutely. Someone's written this down and they've put it together as a nice process and they've filled in all the gaps. Okay, so it's just to give you some perspective there, and one of the other things I want to keep in mind for you is this is always evolving. You're going to go work on teams, and whatever process you're going to be using isn't going to be as good as it could be, and you are going to be adapting and changing those processes over time to improve your ability to deliver software. It's continual. There's no one perfect right way to do it. That's one of the reasons we're talking about lots of ways here. All right, so back to where we are. So from Waterfall, then, you can kind of, if you want to talk about the methodologies we've done, we've got this extreme programming by Kent Beck. There's a lot of good stuff in extreme programming. But what it seems to miss is a real sense for people that Scrum had with these sprints. Now, the reality of what you see in 342, this modern Scrum, is not just, pure Scrum is just, we're going to have sprints, and we're going to have this cycle. We do some sprint planning, we've got daily stand-ups, we do a sprint review and a retrospective. That's the Scrum cycle. It can be applied to any project in the world, doesn't have to be software. a lot of the things that we do software-wise, stories, story points, estimating, we talk about all of our code reviews, unit testing that we apply, all this stuff, where there's a lot of practices that we have added, that the reality is what we have today is a Scrum plus extreme programming hybrid, really. So this has Scrum plus the XP practices. You know, oh, we're using pair programming. Oh yeah, we're a Scrum Agile shop. Well, Scrum really means you've got a bunch of sprints. A ton of that other stuff is borrowed from extreme programming. And so, again, this is sort of the evolution. Things change. I really see sort of I don't know if people would agree with the evolutionary path here, but I basically see, Kanban here, and what it's doing is over in another world over here, manufacturing, our ideas of lean, and there, by the way, there's lean software development practices as well and stuff, but Kanban in particular, let's look at Toyota. Oh, Toyota does this thing on their factory floor and they're with inventory and everything to minimize waste. They've got their Kanban process. Well, we'll adapt some ideas. It's not a one-for-one perfect copy, but let's take some of those ideas and we're gonna meld them with what we know about software and what seems to be working well and create this thing called Kanban. And Kanban is going to be really characterized by throwing away sprints. There's no more sprints with Kanban. So we're sprints and in XP we've talked about it. We've got these weekly planning cycles and stuff, and so XP kind of has by default a 1 week sprint to it. So control was wrested away from, was added to Waterfall by saying, let's stop planning everything up front. Let's instead, we reach to this sort of stage here. A really big thing is, delay till the last responsible moment. All right, but Scrum and XP still come from the world of Waterfall, where it feels good to talk about, we start a project, we implement it, we develop it, we test it, we ship it. All right, that's our sprint. In XP, we did it in 1 week. In Scrum, 1 week, 2 week, whatever. We got some flexibility with our sprint length. Scrum also adds these really nice elements of being sure that we'll tell you how to run your stand-up. We'll tell you all these other rules about process that were sort of hand-wavy in extreme programming. Whereas a lot of the solid practices were not hand-wavy. It was like, you do this practice this way. So things that are well-defined got merged together here. So we're going to delay to the last responsible moment. And the other thing is you're going to be sure to work in priority order. So yes, we're going to plan out an overall view with our product. We're going to do our user story maps. We're going to make a release plan. We're going to understand what's important, but we're then going to have the discipline to work in priority order, trying to create a piece of software and grow it incrementally. Again, those incremental ideas are super strong in extreme programming. I think Scrum gave it a lot of structure, And as well, there's value, of course, certainly to the review with the client and the retrospective with the team. The review with the client replaced extreme programming's, oh, we're going to have the person in-house with us, the customer in-house. We just can't really always do that. So instead, we'll make the ceremony of doing a sprint review and explicitly force ourselves to go get feedback from the customer. All right, but this is really the big thing. We're not going to write all the specifications for everything until we know that we actually need to do it. We're not going to do the development work in the wrong order. We're going to do the development order in an order that makes sense, because if we're doing the highest priority stuff first and changes happen, we haven't wasted our time on things that were lower priority that probably would get canceled anyway. So Kanban then takes it to the next step. We've got no sprints now. Okay. It's going to have a continuous workflow associated with it. We're just always going to be working with it. And it replaces that with, to control what's going on, we're going to have work in progress limits. So the work in progress limits is all about making sure that we don't have wastage. Okay, so the sprints here prevent the wastage. All right, we don't plan stuff until we know that we actually need to plan it. So we do it we don't specify out, write all the specs, and figure out how to build it until it's time for the actual sprint, where we do it. In Kanban, so we're going to get rid of the sprints, but we're going to, by putting a limit on how much work is done, you'll see this in a moment with different stages, we're going to have a sense of, oh, yeah, we're still going to make sure we don't specify too much stuff. We're not going to end up with, if you think of the factory, we're not going to end up with a pile of inventory here that's sitting and being wasted. We're going to use it as necessary and as needed. So I think, I think you might be at the moment going, if this is what the reality is, why is not everyone using Kanban? And why are we not using it in this class? I actually think that is because in evolutionary world, I don't know how we want to say this, but this is really clear cut for people. There's really good rules to follow. Kanban, I think, still is going to require a bit more maturity in a team. XP required way too much maturity in the team to do the right things and stuff. And so the rules in Scrum help people control stuff. So I kind of think of it as a progression. Once you learn Scrum, going to Kanban is really good. On the other hand, Eric Brechner, he does say that he has success with taking teams at Microsoft that are traditional Waterfall teams and jumping all the way to Kanban. Part of that is, we'll see in a moment, is that Kanban is supportive of the idea that people can specialize in their tasks. So for the waterfall approach, a place like Microsoft, it's extremely common. We got program managers. They're busy specifying things. They're busy writing specs. We have developers. They're busy writing code and implementing things. We have a whole set of software developers in test and testing, the QA side. These people specialize in these roles, and those roles also represent the flow through the waterfall. Then Kanban supports the notion of letting people specialize in their roles. Scrum is not so big in that. Scrum is much bigger on, we've got a small team, everyone is playing every role, you're sort of able to do all the tasks that come about, and which, by the way, is a real big mentality that's a little bit more similar to XP, but I think it's even stressed more in Scrum. Oh, everyone has to be able to do everything. Well, Kanban says that's just not realistic, and it doesn't help us scale things up. So the waterfall teams actually can probably make a faster transition by going straight to Kanban. If you're an existing Scrum team, you can go there, but you might feel uneasy because you're losing some of the constraints with the sprints. All right, that's enough of the introduction. Then let's get into the actual mechanics of Kanban.